wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for joining me on yet another Nexus Voices podcast episode. Today, the topic is going to be about female leadership. I think this is going to be a pretty insightful discussion, and I think it will be pretty interesting. The way that we'll conduct the discussion is going to be, I think, fourfold. We're going to start off very general, talking about what leadership is, and then we'll look at specifically what female leadership entails. And then after that, we'll look into the challenges females face when in leadership roles, or how to show their leadership and the challenges that they face in this contemporary society. And finally, we'll look into some strategies and opportunities that young people can look towards in order to build up their leadership skills. Alright, so I'll hand it over to Mya and Mariam, my guests for today, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, my name is Mya Debussy. I'm a first year medical student at the University of Melbourne and I am very new to leadership, but I've tried my very hardest to get the skills required, and it is a continual journey. I did the Muslim Leadership Program, which is a program run by ISRA. It's a fantastic program. I did that last year and I've been a mentee, I've been a mentor, and I'm constantly trying to lead myself. So I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for coming along. And we also have Mariam Atay from Sydney.
Yes. Hi, my name is Mariam Addy. I'm from Sydney. I'm a second year teaching student, and I also do a Bachelor of Writing and Publishing. I'd say that I've been in leadership for quite a while now. I've been part of the pastoral care program at Amity College since I was in year 9, and I was mentoring kids much younger than me. And now that I'm in the teaching space, I do a lot of tutoring and mentoring with kids, and I'm involved with the Youth Nexus mentoring programs as well. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I'm so happy to have you guys along for the ride. I guess we'll jump right into it. So, what is leadership in an Islamic context? I guess we'll start off general and then we'll move it towards what female leadership is. So I guess the best example of leadership is the Prophet ﷺ. And right from the start, we can see that leaders have an embedded quality of integrity and trustworthiness. We all know that the Prophet was called Al-Amin. This is Jahiliyyah time, like pre-Islam. So we know that fundamentally to a leader, it's important that they have these qualities of trustworthiness and respect. But I think as Islam was revealed, we saw different dimensions to that leadership. Do you guys care to kind of elaborate on that as well?
I think that, studying the seerah is so important, but also studying, the women around the Prophet at the time and how they acted. And, Aisha radiallahu anha, she narrated a lot of hadith, and so we can learn a lot about, indirectly we can learn a lot about her leadership and her general personality. But yeah, I think it's really interesting to see how the introduction of Islam to a community changed the way people carry themselves. And I guess we can somewhat compare that to our modern context as well, dealing in non-Muslim circles and Muslim circles, and how do we need to adapt to be able to transfer or convey Islamic characteristics in both of those circles.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important, touching on that kind of pre-Islamic time into the Islamic context, and how we're kind of in a similar time. We have Islam, but we're in a society that is fundamentally un-Islamic, and we're kind of attacked with it every day. And so we really kind of carry leadership in our representation, and we're not just, representing ourselves, or representing the deen. And I think that really kind of touches in with that point of integrity and being trustworthy to really put on the right image. Yeah.
Yeah. And can I just add that I think that sometimes we forget, maybe not intentionally, that the Quran is the last book, so the role models in Islam are meant for the rest of time. And I think sometimes we find it hard to apply the situations that happen for leadership. So I think I've been reading this book. It's called Women Around the Messenger, and it just talks about the Prophet's wives and how they kind of interact in their role and their leadership. And I think it's just a lot more nuanced and so interesting, and how a lot of it is actually applicable in this day and age as well. So just a recommendation.
Yeah, no.
I think I'm curious to read that book myself now, because I think that's a big gap for a lot of young Muslim women is I know the stories. I know, Khadija was a businesswoman. I know this and that. But how does that transfer to me right now, especially if I feel like the leaders or the men in my circles might not necessarily have that same interest in female leadership?
I think it's a very good point, because I think a lot of the cultural kind of expectations kind of come to the surface in conversations of Muslim leadership.
Yeah.
But I think people just don't really know the Islam, they don't really know the context, they don't really know the history of like female leadership within the Ummah.
That's a shame to hear, especially that I think both men and women can benefit from like men and women leaders in the space, because I think we each offer different perspectives and that kind of stuff. And also from an outsider's perspective, from non-Muslims looking in, I think it's I think like whenever I talk to my non-Muslim friends and they see like a Muslim woman in a leadership role, and they're like, wow, she's so amazing. Like I know even like a recent senator in parliament that was a hijabi woman, like I remember just even my non-Muslim friends were like, wow, that's so amazing, she's doing so well. And it's like, this is not surprising. Like it's like Muslim women can be good leaders and they can be in these roles and stuff like that. So
yeah, and it's kind of up to us to break those barriers, isn't it? And talking like as a man, it's up to us to kind of support our female sisters in that pursuit.
Yeah, I think it needs to be a norm to see things like that, like the senator, rather than the exception. Like, wow, she got up all the way up there. It's really important to have that representation, just to pave the path for more people to get to that spot.
Yeah, and historically, like, women have been in like every kind of sector. Like we've had women be like leaders as in they've been entrepreneurs. We know Khadija radiallahu anha was an entrepreneur. She was one of the leading businesswomen in Mecca. We know that Aisha radiallahu anha was teaching a lot of men and women in her time. She was great wealth of knowledge. She's one of the most knowledgeable people at that time within the Sahaba. We have figures like Fatima bint Muhammad al-Bahriya, who she was the first person to open up a university. So in the world, like these are huge kind of accolades and accomplishments, and they've all come from our rich Islamic tradition.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and I don't know enough about her to comment, but I think it's interesting to reflect on what might it have been about her personality, or maybe just her gender, that led to such an amazing accomplishment, and how we can tap into that ourselves as women.
Yeah, I think a lot of the time it's just kind of like a stigma. A lot of men especially kind of view women as like not having the same leadership qualities as men do. But in fact, it doesn't have to be identical leadership. We can have equal leadership in different ways. And I think, if anything we've learned from the seerah of the Prophet and his wives and other examples in the Quran like Mariam and Asiya and the Queen of Sheba, we know that women can be leaders, really good leaders at that. If not, they have a different way of leading, and that's completely fine.
Yeah, I just want to talk about how I think when some Muslim men in this generation hear about Muslim women leadership, they immediately associate it with like the feminist movement that's like happening nowadays, and they get freaked out like this is anti-Islamic, when really Muslim women just want a space to be leaders in the same way that we've seen leadership in our Islamic female role models. So I think there's a bit of that confusion and that miscommunication that happens. So it'd be nice to bridge that gap.
Would you guys say we're kind of in like a transition period? Because on one hand, I feel like a lot more men and women have become more open to pushing their daughters and sons to become leaders, Muslim leaders, and be proud of that identity. But then I guess there's still some drawbacks in like the stigma, the stereotypes. What does it mean for my daughter to be out there? What do I want her to do? What do I not want her to do? And some of those concerns are valid, but they might be steeped in cultural stereotypes and cultural limitations as well, which can be really hard as a young female to navigate.
Yeah, so I guess my question to you guys would be, how would a young Muslim female how have you guys navigated it thus far? And what's kind of like inspired you to kind of go upon the path that you've gone on?
Mariam, do you want to start?
I don't know. Well, I guess from my experience, I've always been in a Muslim space, and during high school, I was in an all-girls Islamic school, predominantly Muslim school. So I've never really struggled with that leadership element, perhaps, because I was always in a space I was like fully supported, and I was female Muslim space. It wasn't until uni where I began to realize it was a bit different, but because I'm not visibly Muslim and I don't wear the hijab, I think I don't struggle as much as like other Muslim women would have. So far, it's been good for me.
Yeah, I think it's good to acknowledge the good stuff too. Like, alhamdulillah, we do have, there are a lot of supportive networks and communities like the Muslim Leadership Program, like Youth Nexus, and those schools as well. Personally, yeah, I can't really complain. My dad was really supportive. My mum, my sister is a fantastic role model for myself as well. But I think, as you were saying, Mariam, about like the transitioning to university, you know, it's more on you now to decide how you're going to navigate the world and how you're going to implement your own self-leadership and how you're going to influence others. And I think the only kind of advice would be, you know, as much as you can, surround yourself with people who are going to foster good in you. And that might be a bit limited if you're still, you know, quite young and maybe, yeah, the parents are not as supportive. But as you get older, you know, joining those extracurriculars, those leadership programs in university, trying to surround yourself with good communities like the Islamic Society, good friends, it will be easy, inshallah.
Yeah, I think what you said was kind of really important, like that educative element and that supportive element. Like, Muslim, like, leadership is kind of impinged upon us fostering that leadership. If we keep hiding away our girls, keep hiding away our women, and saying that they don't have a space, then, well, when they are in the space, they're just going to be completely inadequate, right? So instead of kind of taking a limited view, we need to kind of look to the Sunnah. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to kind of endow them with the skills necessary to thrive and not just survive. And I think you could say it both ways. Like, men and women both need that sort of education. I think especially in that modern context where you know, a lot of our kind of principles are being challenged fundamentally because, you know, we're compromised. We see all these different things around us, and especially when we come to uni, we're attacked with different ideologies. So to have that clear sense of purpose and clarity and have those principles in why we do what we do and how to kind of maintain that is so important. So having those groups around us to give us that knowledge, to give us that support, that's, I think, the kind of fundamental issue that needs to be tackled and supported for us to kind of grow. I guess we'll kind of like move on to the next question, and we kind of touched on it here, but I want to talk about like representation and visibility. Like, what kind of experience have you guys had in university with your representation, with your visibility? Like, what kind of pressures and expectations does that place on you being female and Muslim? And has that kind of enabled you or stopped you to be part of that community?
This is a really good question, especially as a first-year medical student. So I've had a transition from my undergraduate to a postgraduate, which is a lot more professional in the sense that this is what I'm going to do now. And there aren't a lot of Muslims in my cohort, especially visibly Muslim, i.e. hijabis. And I think a lot of the barriers, you're the only one in the room. You're the only Muslim in the room a lot of the time. And I'm sure, you know, my, you know, fellow speakers can attest to this. But I think for the first few weeks, it was very difficult for me. I felt like I was placing my own kind of barriers on myself. Like, oh, maybe my voice is not as important, or they're not going to listen to me. All of this was, you know, made up in my head, overthinking. So I think that's very normal when you're in a foreign environment and you're the only one that looks like yourself. But then I guess trying to switch that thinking to more of, you know, what it means to be a Khalifa on this earth, and how actually it's a blessing to be the only Muslim in the room because you have the honor of representing your ummah, if you can do it right, that is. And that's such a huge responsibility, but I hope that I do it justice. And
like mad respect to the sisters with the hijab on and like are out there in the workforce, in university, who are being good representations of the deen, because it's it's tough, man. It's tough. It's tough to be Muslim. It's not tough, so to speak, but we are constantly challenged with our nafs. Like
Yeah.
we're constantly being attacked, and especially in a Western society, it's harder for women than it is for men. I think, in that sense, to represent at the minimum. Like our hijab is different. For example, the men's hijab is to obviously lower your gaze, to do, act in a way that's pleasing to Allah. So that it's a separate sort of thing. So, but this is sort of an internal kind of thing. For women, it's really like, outside. It's really visible. And people will judge not only you, but the whole thing. For men, you can be like undercover Muslim, They people look at me and they'll think I'm just like another Indian, It doesn't really, click with them. Unless like I tell them, hey, I'm Muslim, Whereas the Muslim sisters, they can't get away with that as much.
But would you say that have there been many times where you've had to kind of have to be the voice for the Muslim Ummah in your line of work?
As a law student, like it's kind of always in the background because you're obviously like you're looking at like the laws and you're matching it to your own values and your own system. So yeah, there are kind of a lot of like underlying things. There's no like overt instances where I've had to come out and be like I'm Muslim. Usually the environment is quite inclusive. Like for example, they'll ask you, do you eat halal? For example, when you go out to like a networking event or something, and unfortunately it just can't be avoided. But alcohol is really prominent in a lot of these kind of in this industry, let's say. So that is kind of always around. But whenever for example, I went to like a competition recently, and I asked the manager there, she was the HR manager, and I asked her, I was like, I need a place to pray. Can I have a room to pray? And she was like, sure, go take that room. So in terms of like answering your question, where I've had to kind of represent the deen, I've never felt an explicit need to go out and be like, I'm Muslim, I'm this, I'm that. But whenever I've needed to do my prayers or whatever it is to be Muslim, I've never shied away from that. And, so it's something that you can kind of get away from. In terms of, advocacy and things like that, that's, something that I'm passionate in, and that's something that I would like to do for work. But I think that's along a different vein, But yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but...
Yeah, I just want to add, this was back to Maya's previous point, but about how like being Muslim and like being seen as Muslim and stuff, you're kind of expected to represent Islam, and in a way it is a good thing, but it's also kind of difficult to balance that because everyone's on their own journey, Islamically, of course, and sometimes you just want to be like, oh, is that how am I representing the religion correctly? And I always feel that pressure when I tell people I'm Muslim. I'm like, okay, this is how our Muslims act, and this is how we should be, and all of that. I just was wondering, do you feel that kind of pressure, or is that?
Oh, 100%. But I think, I think I've just tried to make it like I don't know if it's a fun thing, but like I'm always the best dressed in the room, for example. Not because I'm a fashionista, but because I value modesty, and so I can't come in like sweatpants and a t-shirt. And yeah, like I
like that twist on it. I like that you've made it, a thing for you to,
it's
take pride in.
exciting, and like embracing that I'm different, and like that's a good thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily like lovely people around me, but I don't want to have to try to assimilate. That's,
exactly. Yeah.
And I like what you said about advocacy as well, because in medicine it's a big thing. You're an advocate. You're also 20 other different things, but an advocate is one of your main roles. And I was just reflecting, like, you rarely see Muslim female surgeons or like really high up specialists, like medical specialists. And as I was saying before, like it needs to become the norm, not the exception, to see Muslim women in those positions. And probably for the most obvious example is, women need medical care too, but also advocacy. Like who's going to be the best advocate for you as a Muslim woman? It's going to be a fellow Muslim woman. So you can't beat around the bush. You can't really argue that women don't need to be in these spaces, right?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think it's a disservice to the whole ummah if we don't encourage our women to kind of take that step and to be part of the community and to be leaders. right? Because we're essentially just depriving ourselves of 50% of our brilliance. And, you know, who loses then? It's, you know, like, it's up to us to kind of be present, be representing, and through our actions, through our conduct, to give dawah. And I think touching on your point, Mariam, about, you know, being outwardly Muslim and having reservations about showing your Islam. I think at the start of uni, I was scared. Like, I was scared coming from an all-boys Muslim school, coming into this different space and telling people I was Muslim. It's kind of daunting because you're in a bubble. But I think it's with age or with experience. I found that the more often you show your Islam and you're proud of it and you make it a part of yourself to other people, that they become more comfortable with it too. Yeah. And so you're not treating them as like second-class citizens, but you're all like first-class citizens and you're all on the same playing field. And we need to take more pride and we need to ask for more. You know, like we see it all around. Like we see it all around with other like minority groups. They're proud of what they are, and so we should also take that step and be proud of who we are, and really show our deen off, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that benefits them as well.
Yeah.
As well as getting our needs met. Yeah, I guess we'll transition into the kind of next topic is how does one become a leader? So I think we all talked about our kind of struggles with being Muslim in, you know, the university context and in our respective industries, and how, you know, we're being representatives of the deen. But how do we kind of improve on our leadership skills? How do we improve that representation? I'll start off with Maya and then we'll go to Mariam.
Yeah, so when Ayan first came up to me and told me he wanted me to be on this episode, I was like, brother, I don't think I've got enough leadership experience. And that's okay, I think, because I'm still quite early on in my career and just generally being out in society. But I think I've definitely done things, whether indirectly or directly, to try to prepare myself, because leadership isn't just what we think it is. It's not just, you know, leading a big team in a corporate office. It's, you know, leading yourself to get through an assignment and not slack off. It's leading your siblings so they, you know, get a good ATAR like their baba wants. It's, you know, leading your friends, you know, let's go pray. It's in every part of your life. And as I said earlier, it is a bit harder for women because we are leaders in so many different spheres. You know, particularly the family sphere, your role is more compassionate, empathetic, and then in the workplace you have to kind of be a bit more brutal because people are going to have that expectation of you that you're softer and not as loud,
outspoken.
Outspoken, yes. But yeah, so for me, again, still very early on, but willing to just accept that you want to get to that spot. You want to get to that place where you can be a good representative for other Muslim women, and so you reach out to those women that are already there. So I've been a mentee for quite a while, especially part of the MLP program. Shout out to Shahida, she's amazing. And even just my dad, my sister, always listening to their advice because they've been there. And I'm not going to lie, networking scares me.
It's hard, man. It's hard. It doesn't get easier.
Yeah, but in truth, like, have you, in the chances that you have talked to fellow Muslim, you know, leaders, have they ever kind of just been like, nah, get away from me, I don't want to talk to you, especially at networking events? Like, that's what they're there for. Yeah. And when you're in that spot, inshallah, like already we are, as, you know, Mariam's a mentor, you know, I've mentored, I've tutored, people look up to you already, which is scary. But I'm always willing to give advice if I feel qualified. So I imagine that older, more senior, more experienced leaders would be very happy to just help you.
Yeah. And just going recently at the University of Melbourne, there was a careers expo and we saw so many kind of professionals and leaders in the industry, and none of them were like, oh, I don't want to talk to you, I don't want to network with you. You know what I mean? It's, you know, the lawyer that, her name was Nancy, I forgot her surname, but anyway, her name was Nancy, and she said something really, like, I walked up to her after the panel, and I asked her, I was like, hey, can you give me some tips on networking? And she was just like, ask. She's like, always ask questions, and people will give to you. Put yourself in that position, be open, and, you know, go in with like no expectations and see what happens. Because more often than not, people want to help. People want to be that person to elevate you. They want to be part of your journey. and especially that we have that shared identity as Muslims, and
Yeah.
that we all are kind of like in this minority group, and we all need to kind of lend each other a hand. That makes them more willing to kind of favor you, and we should lean on that. We should really use our faith as something that brings us together, instead of something that we kind of like just use as a part of our identity, and not in any other sense. Mariam, what do you think?
Yeah, that's an interesting point, that leadership networking can be a form of leadership. But I just found it interesting about Maya's point about how, especially Muslim women, our leadership is like in all facets of our life, like with our friends, with our family, like the home space, and as well as like the workspace and all of that. Like it encompasses all like facets, and it's not just like the traditional like leader of something really dramatic. So I've never thought about it that way, and I like that, because like even just like advising your friends to pray, like that's also like a form of leadership and helping them. So I really like that perspective, and I haven't considered that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it becomes really evident. This is going to be, I'm not going to spend too long on this because it's just an observation, but especially with things like next steps, especially when you hit the early 20s mark, are you going to get married? Are you going to move for work? Are you going to pursue this post-grad? You've got leaders in all three of those fields telling you to do something different, right? Like your mum is saying this, your aunties are saying this, your boss is saying this. And the only thing I've taken away from all of that is, again, going back to self-leadership and thinking about what do I want? What do I need based off of the sunnah and the role models of the Prophet's time? And I guess going back to my mentor, she was just so impactful for me, because she had it all in talking marks, in the sense that she was a mother and she was from the same background as me, and yet she was in such a high spot. So I guess picking and choosing what advice you take from different people in those different spheres is going to be like a balancing juggling game that you have to do.
Yeah, and I think it's good that you noted that. It doesn't have to be like one or another. Like, in this kind of, like, it's always been that women and men wear different hats. Like back in the Prophet's time, women were working too. They were out in the fields. They were helping their men out. Agriculture and hard labor, that was the medium, the what do you call it, the labor of the day. Like, it wasn't us working a corporate job. That was it. And they were doing that. At the same time, they were being mothers as well. They were rearing their children. So I think the Sunnah shows us that you can have it all. But I think it's important to have the right intention and having the right purpose, and then reflecting on that, and then doing all these other things.
Yeah.
Kind of really insightful discussion, guys. Any final remarks before we wrap up the episode?
I guess just finally, we're talking about some ways in which you could practically take steps towards being a leader, but you can't do it in isolation. Yes, it takes a lot of self-reflection and knowing what are your values and trying not to fall for the traps of stereotypes, etc. But just engaging yourself in community work, whether you're the recipient or the provider, like being a tutor, being a mentor, or being a mentee, engaging in your Islamic societies if you're a university student, but even finding good work with good corporations that are surrounding Islamic principles. For example, I'm a tutor at Happy Brain, and they do some really wonderful work for to uplift students from disadvantaged backgrounds. So you'll indirectly get the benefits from being in that position of authority.
Yeah, good points.
And I want to add that with young women who want to go into the leadership space but don't, there's like a lot of opportunities these days, like the Muslim leadership program at ISRA that you guys were mentioning, like that's an opportunity. Youth Nexus has their own leadership programs. Like there's so many opportunities, so even if you're not confident in your leadership skills, there's so many opportunities to like build that up. So I'd just say just join, just apply, do as many opportunities as you can. There's so much out there these days.
Yeah, I think that was kind of really important, Mariam, where you kind of discussed like not being afraid of failure, like, just having a go, giving it your best and learning from that experience. I think so often people are so scared of judgment. And I think judgment, like, I know we're opening up another discussion, but it just came to my mind, and I think, we'd be doing a disservice if we didn't kind of discuss it. But judgment within the Muslim community itself is quite a big thing, I think. And we all need to kind of look inwards and be like, no, are we really, judging for the right reasons? And should we even be judging at all? Like, it's Allah's job to judge. It's our job to speak the haqq. Like, it's our job to speak the truth. But if someone is doing a good thing and maybe they're getting some things wrong, what has the Prophet kind of taught us in how we approach that person? You know, in the Battle of Uhud, for example, like, it's the classical story of where the Prophet really kind of insisted that they stay on the hill, that the archers stay on the hill, the 50 archers. And then they moved. In the aftermath of the battle, 70 Sahaba were martyred, and the Prophet was injured as well, obviously. But the way he approached that situation, he forgave them on the spot. And the people, they were like, how are you forgiving us? We did some crazy wrong, and here you are forgiving us so easily. And then the Prophet received revelation, and that revelation said, be compassionate, be merciful, and seek their consultation later. And I think that kind of shows like a duality to leadership, that, you know, even when there are mistakes, we should take it with grace, and we should even go back to them and ask for more consultation. We should make them feel included, and we should show love. We should show love to our leaders and love to our people who are representing us, because that will, you know, give them more confidence and obviously help them in their endeavors, which is our endeavor.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you guys want to add anything to that?
I think you summed it up.
No.
Yeah.
I think that was really good. Just anyone out there who wants to join a leadership program, just do it. Like, especially the young Muslim women out there. That's all I can say.
Yeah. I think we had a really good discussion, guys. Thank you once again, Mya and Mariam, for joining us. And that's Youth Nexus Voices podcast signing off. Thank you, guys. Bye.